Hello, I'm George White, and this is What's Left.
When I said, hey, hey, what's right, man, I want to take you back tonight just to see you smile. You don't gotta be there,
1, 2, 3, 4. And I'd like to introduce my co-host, René Barnett.
Hello.
Hi, René. You all right?
I'm doing all right. How are you guys over there on the other side?
Doing all right, hopefully.
Good. I know we've got a couple of sick colleagues, but I'm just getting over that flu that's been going around all over the world, I guess, apparently.
Yeah, I think we've got it as well.
We want to wish our co-host Sean and our co-founder James a speedy recovery from the flu bug. We miss you guys.
And I'd like to bring on our guest for this evening, Clinton Smith. Hi, Clinton.
Good evening, folks. Thank you, George. Thank you, René.
Hi. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
So Clinton, do you just want to say a few words of introduction? Where are you from? And
yeah, absolutely. My name's Clinton Smith. I'm the chair of Preston Black History Group. We are based in Preston in the northwest of England, in a region that I refer to as God's County, which is equivalent of your states. Not that I'm biased in any way, shape, or form.
Absolutely not. So, did you establish this group, Preston, Clinton, or was this something that you joined up with at some point?
Right. The kind of pencil profile for myself is that I had a very successful career in amateur sport. And at one point the light went on and I thought, well, I don't really know that much about my own history and culture because I was born in Jamaica and came to England at a fairly young age. So I decided I need to find out more about my own history and culture. So I started attending meetings that were run by a local group as an individual, interested individual. And the more I found out, the more I wanted to know. I then, over a period of time, started challenging the group about having a consistent name, being constituted, and operating permanently around the calendar rather than just coming together to celebrate Black History Month, which is in October in England as opposed to February,
right.
The other side of the pond.
Yeah.
I was persistent with my questions and my suggestion, and eventually we came to a standoff and we had one meeting, and there was two objectives. One was I will be allowed to present my business case for carrying out the three suggestions that I made, or somebody from the other side of the table would argue to carry on as they were. To cut a long story short, I made my presentation, and at the end of the night, I won my argument, and the group decided on a permanent name. We were going to operate 12 months of the year, and we will be constituted, which gave us a structure that funders and other bodies recognise and like. If you don't have a structure, they just think you're a bunch of rabble that just gather and do strange things in unprofessional manner. So that was back in 2011.
Oh.
So we've been going quite a while. And the aim of the group, as was my desire, was to learn about Black history and culture. And the group adopted a strapline that talks about researching, celebrating, and preserving Black history and culture, a shared history for all. And the for all is written in capitals because we think it's important that we state from square one that Black history is not a separate part of world history. It's an integral part of world history. It's just never been given the credit that it rightly deserves for its contribution to the development and evolution of mankind. So that's our strapline, and that, in very, very simple terms, is what we aim to do, without pointing a finger and trying to make people feel guilty for things that have happened in the past. I'm not saying they were right, I'm not saying they were wrong, and I'm not making light of any of it. It's irrelevant.
Yeah.
But we wanted to say that this development to the evolution of mankind was put together, designed, invented, whatever, by a person of African origin. And when we talk about Black history, we talk about the history of people of African origin. So if you were to run DNA samples in,
yeah, that's everybody,
in
isn't
places
it?
like Angola or Angola in continental Africa, Antigua in the Caribbean, Botswana in Africa, or Barbados in the Caribbean, you find that some 80% of the genes are common African genes, but we're separated by a big stretch of water.
Isn't there the theory? I don't know if it's accepted scientific theory, but that we all spring from one woman in Africa. So, in other words, we are all African, if that's the case.
That's a theory I've heard. That's a theory I believe, if you look at the evolution of mankind. So again, we're coming back to this contribution to mankind. But somewhere along the lines, the system, because there's no one individual to take credit for that, suddenly decided that on this side of the fence it's black blood, and on this side of the fence it's white blood, and it's different. And that's kind of some of the arguments we have in this country, in England. So yes, that theory does exist, and I believe it to have some substance behind it.
Yeah, it seems to.
I think it's something that you mentioned there, Clinton, about it being the shared history, because I think it will resonate with a lot of our listeners, because ultimately there is only one working class.
That's right.
Well, when I come to talk about the Battle of Bamber Bridge, which is the real topic I'm going to go into, that rears its head again, and it's a very, very significant belief by the people of Bamber Bridge. But I'm not going to spoil that, so you just gonna have to be patient till we get down to that bit, because it's a real driver in this story.
So Clinton, before we get into the Battle of Bamber Bridge, should I perhaps explain just where Bamber Bridge is and the background in which Bamber Bridge is set? Yeah,
absolutely. Please do.
Yeah, so Bamber Bridge is so like Clinton said about the Preston Black History group. Preston is a former cotton weaving town in Lancashire. Bamber Bridge being right next to Preston, between Preston and Blackburn, all up the corridor of this textile weaving area of Lancashire, and it's based within that context that I don't think can be separated from Bamber Bridge, is the history of the weaving, the textile industry that runs up that corridor.
So yeah, in actual fact, that's one of the links that comes out again in the story of Bamber Bridge, because at one time there was real concerns in Preston about where the cotton was sourced from for the mills in not just Preston, but right across Lancashire. Lancashire was a huge production area for fabrics. In fact, at one time, one of the largest cities in Lancashire, Manchester, was actually called Cottonopolis. So much cotton was processed through Manchester, which was then an integral part of Lancashire, but for political reasons, it was annexed away from Lancashire by the political meddlers down south. but there's still a lot of mills and mill-related activities and areas around Preston. A lot have been repurposed into small workshops for small to medium enterprises. So very few of the buildings have gone to waste. And where they have come down, they've actually saved as much of the interior as possible, which is about preserving history.
Wow.
So I started this journey that I stumbled onto by chance in Bamber Bridge when I said to a colleague of mine, after we passed the front of a building, it's had holes, unusual holes in the front of the building. And as a kind of a flippant comment, I turned to my colleague and said, "Oh, you've got big termites here in Bamber Bridge." And he looked at me as if I was totally stupid and said, "No, they're not termite holes. That's the bullet holes from the war." And I had no reference of a fight in Bamber Bridge at all. So I then asked him, "Well, what's the story?" "Oh, it's a fight between the Yanks. They were trying to kill themselves off," he said in a kind of a dismissive manner. I said, No, tell me what's gone on." He said, "Well, it's a fight between black GIs who were stationed at a camp in Bamber Bridge and the white military police who were policing them, and white officers. So it wasn't so much about the white officers who, in reality, were found that they could have performed their duties better. So a bit of apathy crept in. The real issue was a significant number of the military police were from the southern states in America, and the British government passed an act as part of the package to induce the Americans to come into the war, called the Visiting Forces Act. And effectively that said that wherever the Americans were encamped, that would be classed as American territory, and American rules and laws and regulations would take precedence within that camp. Once you came onto the main streets and main area where the locals will go, then British rules and regulations will then take over again. So whatever happened on the camp, the British police, etc., had no jurisdiction to go in and do anything as a demand. They have to negotiate with the camp officials to say A, B, C, and D's happened. We're not happy about it. Could we have a word with Private John Fred or whoever it may be? That kind of gave the Americans a green light to bring in a lot of the practices, protocols, and behaviour patterns, which there's no way of skirting around it. We're talking about discrimination and racism right through. So let's go back to the start of this journey. So after I have this brief summary from a colleague, I kind of filed it under pending, moved along, and some years later, the subject came up again. And I knew I'd heard it, so I dusted off the files, dug out what I'd filed and put the two together. And after 3 such occasions, I thought, you know what, I'm going to look into this to see what it's really about. So the journey started about trying to establish the facts around the Battle of Bamber Bridge. And the facts are that this northern mill town, who had barely seen a black person on film, let alone in reality, was suddenly put in a position where they had hundreds of black GIs stationed in their midst. The GIs were policed by white military police because at this time the American military was a segregated unit, and there were still arguments going on about things like the Tuskegee Airmen and people can't operate complex machinery, therefore they can't fly. And that was a huge political argument that was going on in America with the indirect involvement, and some would say that's not true. It's actually direct involvement of Eleanor Roosevelt to the Tuskegee airfield. That's another discussion for another day if I come back to, if I'm invited back to talk to you again. So the transport unit, which was the 1511th Quartermaster's Truck Division, came in, and they basically ran supplies because, again, the American military being segregated had the black GIs doing menial tasks, because this notion that they don't fight well, they're not brave. There's lots of negatives that later were proven to be obviously the product of somebody's imagination. And they came in, and Bamber Bridge is about 30 miles from a huge warehouse just outside of Liverpool. And from there, they distributed goods, including clothing, munitions, the list goes on, to various sites up and down the country. But all the black GIs lived on the camp, which was called Adams Hall Camp, which is pretty much in the centre of Bamber Bridge. But the military police were barracked elsewhere. So they came in, did the policing, and went out again at the end of their tour. One of the things that the military machine did, it went to the drinking establishments in Bamber Bridge and tried to impose American style segregation on the drinking establishments and the places of recreation. And a typical statement will be, listen, don't have black and white GIs in because there'll be a fight. The black GIs all carry knives and they have tails. There's some horrific stories put out, but the main thing we want you to do is don't serve them. So one version that is surfaced is that following one of these visits, the military police were going past an establishment called the Hob Inn, which again is significant in this story. And as they drove past the Hob Inn, there's a blackboard outside with the words "Coloured Soldiers Only" written in and displayed outside the pub, which did nothing for the blood pressure of the military police. They were just enraged that the locals had the nerve to put up such a sight in support of the black GIs. So things sort of rumbled along with the delivery runs, etc. They came back. As with any military encampment, it attracted a significant number of local females, because when the Americans came in, they seemed to have an abundance of everything, from chocolate to stockings, nylons, the list goes on. And that's not unique to Bamber Bridge. That's just a statement of fact with military encampments.
Oh, yeah.
So some of the locals, and I have to say at this point, only a minority were not too happy with this, but they kept the council to themselves. So we're moving on now to the night in the Hob Inn. It's a Sunday evening, and at that time in England, the pubs stopped serving alcohol or liquor at 10 o'clock. In England, referred to as closing time. So it was quite common for black GIs and the locals to be in the Hob Inn, drinking, intermixing, and just doing what people did in those days. At one point, a message is sent to the military police that there's trouble in the Hob Inn, or the Hob, as it's affectionately referred to. So two military police roll up, and as they walk through the door of the Hob Inn, which is an old, very old, thatched English pub full of character, they saw a black GI, Eugene Nunn, who was not in the correct uniform for being off camp. What you find out a little bit further down the story is that Eugene Nunn was on his way back from Manchester, which is about 30 miles south of Bamber Bridge, and there's nothing to do with that. He was correctly dressed for what he was doing.
Mm.
The military police wouldn't be face down, and they've been called, so they have to have a result. So they then try to arrest Eugene Nunn for being in the wrong uniform. Some of the locals and some British military personnel and land girls then stood side by side with the black GIs and said, there'll be no need for any arrest tonight. They're not causing any problems. Your presence is not welcomed. That went down like a lead balloon to the military police, who are a group that give instructions, they don't take instructions.
Mm.
We give, we don't take. You do as we say. In the end, a scuffle developed. And at one point, it was the black GIs, the locals, and the land girls, and the British military on leave, who were challenging the military police. So again, I said earlier, a lot of these guys are from the southern states, and they weren't used to seeing white folks standing shoulder to shoulder with black folks. So that didn't help the situation at all. The military police then realized they were outnumbered and they could not do very much in a very, very public and open place. So they then looked to exit the pub. As they left the pub to go to the Jeep, a bottle is thrown in their direction. The bottle smashes, some beer gets spilt onto the vehicle, no damage beyond that. The military police then turned around and indicated that we're going to get reinforcements and we will be back. How serious that warning was taken, it's unclear. So they drove off, people went back inside, finished the drinks they had, and left the pub. They were on the way back to Adams Hall, which is about 800-900 yards north of the Hob Inn. As they progressed down the main street in Bamber Bridge, I'm not going to get too hung up on street names and technicalities around that. They're walking back and they're in conversation with some of the land girls and others. The military then return in 2 jeeps with greater numbers, pulled over, and this it went from a conversation to an altercation in a very, very short space of time. Again, those conversations that, you know, they've done nothing wrong, they're out drinking, same as anybody else, they're entitled to have a drink, leave them be. It ended up in a fight, a physical fight. At one point, one of the black GIs reached for the holster of, for the gun in the holster of one of the MPs, and the gun discharges. Now it's all just blowing up, and everything just goes wrong from there onwards. The black GIs, some of the black GIs then started looking for projectiles to launch in the direction of the military police, etc., etc. Some were hiding behind walls, taking cover behind walls because the guns had been drawn. And that went on for a considerable period of time. Eventually, some of the GIs left the scene, went further down the main street and turned off down into Mountain Road back to the camp. And word got back to the camp that the military police were killing black folks for fun on the main street. A non-commissioned officer, who was the only black officer that was involved in all this, managed to kind of talk sense and subdue the black GIs, and things appear to be settling down and control was being re-established. Shortly after this, another vehicle driven by the military police with what's described as an improvised battering ram, crashes through the main gates of the camp, and it all just ignites again. It's as if somebody just poured another gallon of petrol on the smoldering, and it just went berserk. Now the statement that the military police are just out killing black folks for fun is reinforced. The armory gets raided, and there's a lot of arms now going out onto the streets. And from there, the next bit is just a fog, which quite often that's war is about. They talk about war. So I'm not going to try and unpick the exact sequence through there, but we have recorded incidents that the military police at one point had a machine gun positioned on the main street in Bamber Bridge, and there is a suspicion that there was a second machine gun positioned at the other end of the main street near the Hob Inn, just beyond the Hob Inn. And this fight started, and the record tell us that it went on for about 5 hours, just over 5 hours, during which time one GI actually loses his life on the main streets in Bamber Bridge, Private William Crossland. There's still uncertainty about the exact circumstances around his death, and I'll come back to that a little bit further down the road. Eventually, it all subsides and control is re-established, orders re-established, and they go through. In the end, there was one fatality that's officially recorded, and again, I speak with caution. We're in wartime. Nobody wants to be seen as the bad guy, and there's compromises being drawn all the time. And somewhere in the region of 8 or 9 injuries, including firearms injuries. There is an account of a white officer who was injured in the gunfight, and he was scooped up by the GIs. They found a vehicle, drove through all the commotion that was going on, the fighting that was going on, and took him to hospital. So even within that fight for survival, I'm not going to try and dramatize it. I'm trying to stay as blunt and factual as it can be. That compassion is still there. He is an injured man. The fact is not. The fact is white. Doesn't come into it. It needs treatment. We'll get him to the hospital and go from that. Eventually, somewhere 32 GIs were charged with charges ranging from being in the wrong uniform, disobeying a direct order, failure to comply with a request, and the list goes on from there. So the first trial was in a place called Chorley, which is probably about another 5 miles south of Bamber Bridge, if that. And the feeling amongst the locals was that they were dissatisfied with the outcome of the trial, court-martial, and they described it as a kangaroo court. And they, through their action and perseverance, a second trial took place in England down south, probably in Cambridgeshire. It's a bigger American military camp. And the numbers that were tried were reduced. Eventually, going forward, before I come back to where we are, there's a third trial back in America. And again, the charges range from just time in military stockade through to something like 18 months in prison, the threat of being dishonorably discharged from the military, and it left questions being asked all around. So what we find from this is we talk about solidarity, some of the things that were being said by the locals when the Americans were trying to impose segregation was, these are ordinary folks, just like us. They're being taken advantage of. They're in the poorer jobs, the lower paid jobs, and they're just ordinary working folks, same as us. They're here to fight for our freedom and our survival. They've done nothing to offend us. Why should we not welcome them in to our village as it is then and still is now? They went to the church services. They were welcomed into different locals' houses. Having Sunday lunch was not an uncommon thing with American military personnel sat around the family dining table. But it's this stance that the people of Bamber Bridge, commonly referred to as Briggers, that they took in solidarity with the black GIs, who they could see clearly were being oppressed by their own. The black GIs are saying we were fighting two wars. We were fighting Hitler on one hand, and we were fighting for personal survival and freedom and advancement on the other hand. And it just didn't make sense. So that in a kind of a nutshell is a story around the Battle of Bamber Bridge. So as I'm continuing this journey, it goes from a story about black GIs who ended up with effectively an internal fight to a story of solidarity by the people of Bamber Bridge to these visitors who did them no harm, who were coming here for their protection, safety and freedom, and until such time as they cause us any angst or embarrassment, etc., we will treat them the same way we treat anybody else. And the story suddenly swings completely around, away from the black GIs to the residents of Bamber Bridge.
Wow.
That's the kind of message that I never cease to push out through all of this. So this story stayed dormant for a long while. And then in 2013, in fact, in 2012, Professor Alan Rice from the University of Central Lancashire, referred to as UCLan, and I talked about a completely unrelated subject. And I mentioned Battle of Bamber Bridge. And Alan's eyes lit up like two searchlights. And he said, "Oh, that's one of my favourite subjects." He said, "I've been doing this, and this, and this." I said, "Oh, yeah, so have I. I've done this." He said, "I'll tell you what, it's the 70th next year. Let's mark it." And as casual and as relaxed as I've presented that, that's how the conversation went in Alan's office. For the 70th, we had Gregory Cook, who's an American, who'd made the doco film Chocolate Soldiers from the US of A. And that featured interviews with people from Bamber Bridge, and a significant part of it was filmed in Bamber Bridge. So we managed to get Gregory over from New York, and we had a 3-day symposium to celebrate the Battle of Bamber Bridge, featuring inputs from various speakers, including people like Wyn Jones, Professor Wyn Jones. He was already in the Chocolate Soldiers from the USA. Graham Smith, who wrote a book called When Jim Crow Met John Bull. So it's a clash between the Americans and the British culture. And lots of others that came through, because we thought we were doing this small local thing. And then suddenly people are contacting us from Plymouth University, which is like some 300 miles south of where we are. Bear in mind, England's a relatively small country, so to 300 miles is a short hop. To us in England, 300 miles is a significant journey. We had people from Northern Ireland, which is across the Irish Sea. They all wanted to come and make a contribution. We had a lady from one of the Texas University, Dr. Valerie Holt, who was in a place called Tiger Bay in Cardiff, researching her family history, because her father was a black GI. she found out what and so we get this flood of people who all want to contribute to this thing. So we have this fabulous 3-day celebration.
Oh.
What we found, on this Sunday, we rewalked the route that the GIs would have taken on that fateful Sunday evening. But before that, we found one surviving witness to the battle, and she was the centre of that event. So on the Sunday, it's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're there. This lady's name is Eunice Byers. She's an absolute star. So we're there with Eunice, and Eunice is retelling her part of it, what she remembers, and her memory is as clear and as sharp as a razor blade. And then suddenly this dissenting voice from probably 3 or 4 meters to Eunice's left said, no, that's not what happened. This is what happened. And suddenly we have this almost like a game of tennis with 2 mature women feeding off each other. And eventually we worked out that Eunice saw the battle from one point in Bamber Bridge, from the family shop, from the upstairs window of the family shop. This other lady, whose name eludes me at the moment, saw another part of the fight from a completely different angles. So they were both correct in what they were seeing. They didn't realise at the time to join the dots up and paint a bigger picture. So that was pretty interesting. On Sunday morning, the church service was to commemorate the battle. After the main part of the service, the minister sat on the altar. So he takes his collar mic off, and he's sat with the collar mic between himself and Eunice, and the two are just having a chat like 2 friends sat out on a sunny day on a bench, just reminiscing. But she took us back with absolutely crystal clear details of what she saw on that fateful evening. Because, again, as a reflection of the relationship that built up between the GIs and the locals, once the fight started following the crashing of the gates to the camp, some black GIs then went out onto the streets and were warning the locals to go inside, close your door, because there's going to be a fight and there's going to be bullets flying around. So they've got this respect for their host because of the reception they've received, because now suddenly they can walk down the footpath or the sidewalk, whichever is most, without having to step into the road because a white person's walking down the same side as them. They weren't having to queue, and there's an account of a white military police going into the Hob Inn and just walking right past several black GIs who were waiting to be served. And the barmaid, a lady, Vicey, her last name is, stopped this MP and said, whoa, where you go? Oh, I want to get served in front of... No. This is England. We queue. These people have been queuing before you came in. So you have to go to the back of the queue. And what is envisaged is this military police is suddenly queued up behind these black GIs, and inside he must have just been absolutely raging with that. But credit to the lady, to the boy lady, she dropped anchor and said, "No, they were here first. They get served before you. Your rank and position doesn't carry any weight whatsoever in this establishment." So the story carried on and rumbled. And this year, in 2022, after a long campaign, we managed to get a formal plaque erected outside the Hob Inn, recognising the facts of the incident. So it's not there to glorify any aspects of it. It's not there to embarrass anybody else. It just says, and in fact, part of the title says, this incident came out of a misunderstanding. And it tells a story briefly.
Right.
As you can get on there. And that's permanently there, full stop.
Oh.
So let's move forward to, again, we suddenly realised that, in 2019, Alan wrote a piece about the Battle of Bamber Bridge and put it in an academic publication called The Conversation. That piece that is wrote has received north of 400,000 hits.
Wow.
From that, we were contacted by some people from Studio Canal, the filmmakers.
Yeah.
And a producer decided that she wanted to retell the story of, it's an old English film called The Railway Children. But what she did, she inserted what happened in Bamber Bridge into this film.
Oh, wow.
So Alan was used as a historical consultant. I was used in the end as a critical friend to critique the film before it went on its premiere. So we were quite made up with that. So the premiere, we were there with the red carpet and all that kind of thing.
Is it a French film?
No, it's an English film. Just happens to be the Studio Canal is a French company, but they have a huge office in London. That's still available.
Oh,
wow. The producer's a lady called Gemma Rogers.
What's the name of the film?
The Railway Children Returns.
Oh, I'm going to have to look for that.
And the producer is a lady called Gemma Rogers, and it's produced by Studio Canal, who own the rights to the original film. So the 80th is coming up. I'm clock watching now because I'm trying to be use the time wisely. The 80th is coming up, so we planned a 4-day celebration. So on the Thursday evening, we persuaded Gemma to bring the film to Bamber Bridge, and we showed that in the Methodist Church. And the Methodist Church is the new Methodist Church, but the old Methodist Church had regular visitors by the military. These black GIs used to go to church within the church, the Methodist Church. So we had a preamble, then the film, then a Q&A, and it went through. On the Friday, we had a full-blown academic event at UCLan. Our guest for the 4 days was a senior spokesperson from the American Embassy who came up and made no attempt to draw a compromise or anything from it. He just held his hand up and said, that was a dark point in our history. I believe we have moved on. Some would argue that it's not far enough, but we are making progress, because probably around about 47, 48, the laws in America would change and they set the wheels in motion for an integrated military. Some would argue that we still have a way to go on that, but as a result of some of the things that happened in Bamber Bridge in 43, that was one of the end results. When the GIs went back to America, a lot were credited for being very, very active in the civil rights movement, because they'd come across to England and had received, I don't want to say humane treatment, because humane tends to leave you think you're dealing with animals, but they'd been treated as normal human beings, same as anybody else, and they like the treatment they received, which is it's understandable. They go back, and as they're disembarking from the troop ships, in fairly blunt language, which I'm not going to repeat on a broadcast like this, as it came down the gangplank, it's like white soldiers that way, coloured soldiers that way, and the segregation kicked in again. And there's lots you can feed into that goes nicely.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, because I do know that the UK, along with other countries, had their own problems with with race relations and with slavery and things like that. But it does seem like it is different. I have a friend who, it's been a number of years ago now, because we were much, much younger. But she went and spent, I think, 6 weeks or something like that in Europe, traveling around Europe on her own, just, young. I think we were just beyond college age, probably. And she decided to go on her own and just travel around. And she was a Black American. And she got a different feeling there for sure than she did here in the United States. Less difference being made, less feeling, that there was something, different, or, she was being treated in a suspicious manner. And I know that really made an impression on her. And I wonder what that difference is, why that difference. There is something here in the United States that seems to be a little more racist in general. And I'm just not sure what the difference is. Do you have any opinions about that, Clinton?
I think the simple answer is no, because it's a question you look at many times. But what it probably requires is a roundtable conversation with people sharing their experiences, and then we can start drilling down into those experiences, trying to unravel and unpack why it takes place. But I'll make a suggestion for another book that you might want to consider reading. And this book was written in the early 60s. And the book is called Black Like Me.
I've read it.
You've read it.
Okay. I read it in the 60s, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read it right after it came out.
It'd be really interesting to read that again, refresh yourself, and look at the societies we have nowadays, and then tell me how.
You got me walking down memory lane now. But
well, that's what I said. Read it again to refresh yourself.
Book at all?
Sorry?
I was asking George if he'd ever heard of that book.
I haven't. No, I
Black
haven't.
Like Me. Oh,
it's basically
very
about
enlightening.
It's basically about a white man who wanted to tell the world what it's like to be a black man in the southern states of America. So after initially being laughed at by his doctors and friends, having said to him, I want to change the colour of my skin, I want to do this, do that, do whatever. Eventually, his doctor realised he wasn't going to let it go, so he went along with him, and he had a certain amount of medical intervention to try and darken his skin, but then he had to keep toning his skin down as he travelled the states in America. Obviously, he shaved his head, and he had to use cosmetics to try and maintain the persona.
Yeah.
And some of the things he talks about is that during the day when he was hitchhiking, he got virtually no lifts from the lorry truckers up and down. But as soon as nightfall came in, he had an abundance of lifts that were going through. He spoke about being offered hospitality by black Southerners. They basically didn't have 2 cents to rub together.
Yeah.
But he'd be taken to somebody's house. The food that was being, the evening meal that was on the table was divvied up to accommodate one more. And as I said, they didn't have 2 cents to rub together, but they treated him as a family member. And I don't think I'm glorifying the book. Correct me if you think I'm glamorizing the book too much, René.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Oh,
it reminds me of I remember, being much younger and noticing that Black people always speak to each other, even if they don't know each other, and it's like, it's just, common practice, you say, how are you doing, and I think they really mean, how are you doing?
Yes.
Are you all right? We're, I see you, we're going through the same life experience. And, I used to think, oh, what a nice practice, always speaking, to each other. But then I realized that, yes, it is very nice, but it's also comes from a place of, necessity in the past.
Yeah, it's a dark place.
You got to look out for each other.
Yeah.
And really interesting stuff. And I think these are the things that people who've not had the Black experience, the obvious things we know about, but the little things, the always making eye contact, as you meet on the street with each other, it's almost an unconscious looking thing now that I've noticed. It's like, it's not anything you're thinking about as you're walking along and saying, hey, I'm here and I'll protect you or I'll stand with you. It's now so ingrained in at least American Black people that it's
similar over here.
Unconscious practice.
The thing a lot of people don't see is sometimes there's no words exchanged.
Yes.
It's a conversation with the eyes.
Yep.
So you could be, and in fact, I've been challenged by white colleagues saying, "Oh, do you know that?" I said, "No, I've never seen him before in my life." But you acknowledged him. Well, that's what you do.
Yeah,
that's absolutely what you do. I'm mindful of the clock, which I'm furiously watching.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got off on a tangent.
No, it's not. It's not.
I usually do.
What I'd like to do is to. We've now got a part of our website is being built to tell the story of Bamber Bridge. So by about Easter of 2024, that site will be up and it'll be a permanent free reference point for anybody anywhere in the world to look up. But in the meantime, I would actively encourage you to, if you want to know more about the group, look us up on the website. It's www.Preston Black History Group, and that's all one big word, .org.uk. And if there's something you see on there that you like, write to us and tell us. If there's something you see on there that you think is wrong or you don't like, write to us and tell us. Because you might be right. We might have a fact wrong. History is a strange subject to go through. But have a look at the site. And if a question comes up, either contact us directly or come through your three regular hosts, George, Sean or René, and they'll get the question to me. And if I can't answer it, I'd be very surprised if I can't find a scholar who can answer the question. So, this thing. Your time managing on this one, George. So
we've still got time yet, Clinton. But I just wanted to ask as well, and so I was just wondering whether you thought that the sort of the class, the working class people of Bamber Bridge had recognised within the Black GIs being the picked on and the downtrodden of the US military, whether you think that had sort of chimed with them, and that's why there was this natural affinity and this, when there was clearly an injustice going on, they sort of sided with the Black GIs, or do you think it was all something else that was going on?
No, I think it's the former part of your question, and that actually there is evidence where that is actually quite clearly stated. That these just ordinary folk, same as us, they're not given the best jobs, they're not paid the best wages, they have the same issue as us, which is to get a roof over their head, put food on the table for themselves, the partners, the families, etc. And I think the one of the main things, and this is where, in my opinion, so I'm going to go off script a little bit here, where the white Americans didn't do themselves any favor. Too many, so I'm stressing not all of them, came in with a superior attitude and arrogance. And you'll hear negative comments talked about the Americans, that they're overpaid, oversexed, and over here. And that's just the white ones. And I was contacted by somebody from Chorley, because people know what I do, so they send me all sorts of snippets. So some are just fantasy, some are just little nuggets that go through. And he talks about remembering being a youngster in Chorley, and when the white military marched through Chorley, because there's huge encampments around the northwest in general. When the white military, American military, walked through Chorley, they were booed. And this man is now a mature man, has clear recollection of that. Which says when the black GIs were out, they were applauded. But it's that, I think it's what projects from you, and it's a strange analogy to use, but and bear with me as I use this one because I can't think of any immediately. They say that an animal smells things that radiates from you, so they'll smell fear if it's radiating from you. They'll smell safety as it radiates from you. So sometimes it's not the spoken language that gets you through doors. It's how you conduct yourself and what radiates from you outwards. And sometimes we don't even know we are doing it. You know, being polite doesn't cost, and it's not an ultra conscious thing that you have to build yourself and say, right, I need to say good morning to this person, or I need to do the A, B, C, or D. It's either in you, I believe, or not. And what the Briggers were seeing were just these folks who came in, they recognised similarities with them, and they just went in solidarity with them. So solidarity is in the title, so I'll get that one back in again with that one. But it's a brilliant piece of solidarity. And there is a group in England who are going round recording, I'm going to call it Acts of Solidarity. And they are one of numerous film and audio recording groups that has approached Alan and I to go through the incident at Bamber Bridge, because they recognise it as an act of solidarity. So, you know, the Briggers, and the thing about this is 1943. In England, we didn't get things around race relations and equal opportunity for another 20 years. That's how advanced the Briggers were in humanities. So absolute credit to the Briggers. I have the Briggers on a pedestal. That's not to say they can't dish it out. They can dish it out if needs be, but I have the Briggers on a pedestal. The stance that they took, it wasn't a politicised decision. There wasn't a campaign, went up and down the brig to say, right, we need to be nice to these black GIs because this, that, and that. They were just regular folks who saw regular folks being disadvantaged. Their conscience told them that this isn't right, and the ones over there might be treating them wrongly, but we're not going to do what they're doing. We'll just treat them as one of ours. They just opened their arms to them. And if you look back at some of the testimonies from the black GIs, they speak in glowing terms about the reception and the treatment that they received at the hands of Briggers. That's a kind of truncated version of the thing, but obviously it goes on.
Yeah,
it goes on.
You know, it's amazing, and I, for one, am definitely going to look into it. Unfortunately for today, we are out of time, and I do want to thank you, Clinton, for coming and sharing this information. I love learning things, and this is something that, you know, I'd never heard of, and I'm sure there's many more stories of history out there that I don't know and have yet to discover. But so thank you again for being with us, and thank you, George. And so what's left? Well, we've got a long way to go, obviously, in learning how to practice solidarity with each other, learning how to recognize each other as fellow travelers on this planet. So thanks, everyone. See you next time on What's Left.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Clinton.